And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, to this very special segment today on the 25th day of November 2021. Well, Brisbane today is looking amazing. It's not bright or sunny, but it is partly sunny. And currently we are sitting at 23 degrees. It's going to be like that with few showers. Of course, we know we're going to that El Niño effect. So expect rain from time to time, and we will not see full, clear, bright day for a few days yet. Right now, let's get into the news segment today, as we have lots to go through. In this segment, we also have the Daily India Report with Ankita, and then at 10 a.m., we have the very exciting travel updates with Tanvi Goyal of Oz India Travels, as we know that borders are going to be opening, and so there's lots that's going to be happening. So find out about where you can go, how you can go, what needs to be done. Well, right now, let's move on with today's show. First of all, Northern Territory records 11 new local cases.
There were 11 new cases of COVID-19 recorded in the Northern Territory in the last 24 hours, bringing the cluster to a total of 51 cases. One of them is of serious concern. I'll explain that case now. Last night, 4 people from the Binjari community evaded authorities, left the hard lockdown and travelled by taxi into Katherine. One of these people is a woman who was positive for COVID-19. The result was confirmed this morning. The woman did not know that she had COVID-19. She was at large in Katherine and she was infectious. She was found about 10 minutes ago by police at a location in Katherine. As well as the 3 people she left Binjari with, there were 7 others at the location. All 11 are now going to the Centre for National Resilience, and urgent work is being done to determine any other close contacts. Every police resource on hand was thrown at this to locate the case. The Commissioner will talk more about this in a minute. I just want to thank his team for their incredible work this morning. In about an hour, they found out about a positive case at large in the community and found her. That is outstanding. The positive case shows why the hard lockdown in Binjari is so critical and why acting illegally to avoid the hard lockdown is so dangerous. It also shows why the lockdown in Katherine is still so important. There was a positive case on the streets of Katherine. So if you do not... I will go through what we know about the other 10 positive cases now. 3 are children from the same family. One of the children was already at the Centre for National Resilience, quarantining with her mother, who was a previous positive case. 2 other children were quarantining with their father at their home in Katherine East. Those 2 have now tested positive, and they were transferred to the Centre for National Resilience overnight with their dad, who is symptomatic but so far testing negative.
Up to date on Australian Indian Radio and Chantex Multimedia. Well, right now, as we know, this tracking and the way that one case was identified and very quickly located, as he mentioned there, that he'd like to put on record his appreciation for the police department there as well. Well, looking at all of this, how are we tracking? How are we travelling Australia-wide? So how are we tracking with these results? Let's take a look.
Let's take a look at the national vaccine rollout now, and almost 86% of the eligible adult population is fully immunised in Australia. Close to 92% has received one jab. 180,000 doses have been administered in the latest reporting period. Taking a closer look now at each jurisdiction, and Victoria is still stuck behind its 90% double dose target following its first weekend of eased restrictions. More than 93% of people there have had one dose. South Australia's double dose rate is also lagging, despite the state reopening its borders to vaccinated travellers this week. Despite a vaccine blitz in Queensland, the state still has less than 75% of its eligible adult population fully vaccinated. The only other jurisdictions with less than a 75% double dose rate are the Northern Territory and Western Australia.
On Australian Indian Radio, and of course those are the numbers that we have at the moment. Well, what is George Christensen saying about all these COVID restrictions? He compares it to
Think Stalin, Mao, Hitler, Pol Pot, they didn't get there overnight.
The coalition's outrage merchant at it again.
The totalitarian path, the path that we are unquestionably on, has never ended well.
His latest target, state premiers.
The solution is a rediscovery of human dignity along with, and I don't say this lightly, civil disobedience.
Standing in the parliament that makes laws, George Christensen called on voters to break them in protest against vaccine mandates and what he sees as state overreach.
Will the Prime Minister unequivocally and without reservation condemn this call?
Every single person should obey the law and no one should encourage anyone to disobey the law.
Scott Morrison wouldn't name Mr Christensen. Instead, he deflected with a 4-year-old quote from a union leader.
This is a quote from Sally McManus, Mr Speaker.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat.
I believe in the rule of law when the law is fair and the law is right. But when it's unjust, I don't think there's a problem with breaking it.
But the Prime Minister has a big problem.
Vaccine mandates without reasonable exemptions are not only unconscionable, they are criminal.
Divisions over vaccine mandates are deepening in the House and Senate, where a band of rebel backbenchers is threatening to derail their own government's agenda over the issue.
Why has the Prime Minister allowed himself to become hostage to a senator who boasts he's unvaccinated?
A reference to Gerard Rennick, who's claiming credit for changes the government's made to a compensation scheme for people who suffer adverse reactions to a COVID-19 vaccine.
The government has been considering for some weeks now improvements.
It's been a messy week for the coalition. Divisions are on display and internally frustrations are growing that this backbench standoff is paralysing the government's agenda. The Prime Minister has warned MPs disunity could cost them the next election. But for now, the rebels aren't backing down. Jane Norman, ABC News.
They are not backing down, and of course there is a lot of community uproar as well. People are not happy, with all these border restrictions. We are whole of Australia. It should have been just a whole of Australia approach with a very, very different outlook that could have been there. Of course, whatever cases are there, they will always be there. But right now, it's statewide, and there are things happening, funerals and other things, and people are having to take extraordinary measures to attend some very, very simple functions and things like that. But right now, so COVID-19 and the travel restrictions, and with that comes insurance. So what is that insurance does, and what does it cover?
After several lockdowns, Beth and Larry Lee are finally going overseas.
This is going to be fun, man.
How old is she? She's 18 months. They're heading to San Francisco to meet their grandchild Emma for the first time.
Look at that smile. I'm the kind of person that watches people at airports and cries when other people, come in. So really excited and a little nervous.
If something happens and we're stuck over there, we might end up in a hospital.
The Lees have bought travel insurance for almost $700. It covers some pre-existing medical conditions and an important extra.
We went with a company that gave us supplementary policy that covers us for COVID if we're diagnosed before we leave and while we're there, and if travel plans have to change.
Yep.
So that's good.
The policy is void if the Australian government's travel advice changes, and while it covers the Lees if they get COVID, it won't cover their costs if they are impacted by a lockdown.
At this stage, we've not seen any travel insurer that has included cover if you need to cancel because of a border closure.
The boss of insurance company NIB says he doesn't expect this sort of coverage to be offered.
It's not an insurable risk if the entire world shuts down and closes borders. The consequences, financial consequences, are just too dire.
NIB had to change underwriters during the pandemic.
Travel insurance is not the most popular category for global insurers at the moment, for obvious reasons. Frankly, we've had to scramble to establish a new underwriting partnership.
Qantas and Flight Centre are also selling travel insurance with ticket sales again. Their policies are backed by NIB and Covermore. And again, they offer limited coverage if you get stuck in a lockdown in most overseas locations.
Choice are hopeful that some travel insurers in Australia will come to the table and provide some kind of cover for lockdowns.
It is an evolving situation. Travel insurance is definitely evolving. The questions that are coming through on a weekly basis are changing.
Without that sort of cover, Beth and Larry Lee are feeling cautious. The retired teachers have spent $10,000 on their trip and some costs aren't refundable. While travellers like Larry and Beth have managed to find insurance that covers them somewhat for COVID, there is all other sorts of travel insurance, including the type that's tacked onto credit cards, and the fine print for that is even more complicated. The Big Four banks' free travel insurance products exclude pandemics.
Whether it's a click box on a flight booking screen or whether you have credit card travel insurance, you really need to still read it and know whether you're going to be covered specifically for COVID, especially with the credit card travel insurance.
Consumer advocates say it's a buyer beware situation, but that is not stopping Beth and Larry Lee's family reunion.
We love to travel, so we won't stop travelling. We're aware of the fact that your travel plans can be upended at any time.
A risk that many Australians are willing to take.
That's a risk that you take. Even after taking out an insurance policy, you're still running into those risks. Well, that is the irony of the situation that you could have the insurance, but it has got limited cover. But I mean, it might give satisfaction to some people to say we do have travel insurance. Well, now on another scenario, the Religious Vilification Act, which is going to Parliament.
In the suburbs of our cities, Conservative politicians are convinced there's concern about the status of religion.
There's no talk about God anymore. People have forgot that God even exists.
And some worry about the way Australia is changing.
Our marriage between man and woman is sacred.
Do you think at schools they should be discussing?
Yes, they should. They should for the younger generation.
The bill has passed.
Ever since same-sex marriage was made legal in 2017, the Coalition's been contemplating new laws. And tomorrow, the Prime Minister will finally put his much-talked-about Religious Anti-Discrimination Act to Parliament.
We have an Age Discrimination Act in Australia, a Sex Discrimination Act, a Disability Discrimination Act and a Racial Discrimination Act. But at a Commonwealth level, there is a glaring omission, and that is, of course, to protect people of faith.
The bill would give religious-run institutions like schools the right to preference the hiring of people who follow their faith.
I think the bill strikes the right balance. My concern is that it proceed as swiftly as possible.
The proposed legislation would also shield Australians who make religious statements of belief from existing discrimination laws, as long as the comments are made in good faith, don't incite hatred or vilify people. But LGBT lobby groups claim it could make offensive, demeaning comments legal.
Statements like when a nurse says to a patient with HIV that AIDS is a punishment from God.
You need to show that A, that is a statement of belief. Does your religion actually believe that? B, it must be made in good faith. I would argue that if a person is saying that in the workplace, the employer will probably have something to say about that.
Several moderate backbenchers worry that the legislation may make life harder for gay students and teachers.
I want that clarified, and we're talking about a bill that's hot off the presses.
And some others question why the bill is needed at all.
No one has ever approached my office claiming that discrimination on a religious basis.
The government wants the bill voted on next week and sent to the Senate for a full inquiry. It wants to have a Religious Discrimination Act enshrined in law before the next election. And given the number of people of faith who live in key electorates, it's hopeful of eventually getting Labor's support. James Glenday, ABC News, Canberra.
And of course, a much talked about topic at this point in time. Well, they need to be very careful and strike that happy medium and the balance because one way the protection is there or giving the right to make some kind of comments could also lead to people taking advantage of that situation and start all sorts of comments and commentaries. People will look at all those loopholes as well. But the Religious Vilification Act in a proper thought out format would in the long term be beneficial. All right, now it's time to go to our daily India report. With that, let's welcome Ankita.
Welcome to the Daily India report that brings you glimpses of the changing India and the growing engagement of the Indian diaspora with India. In our first story, the Indian government will introduce a bill in winter session of Parliament to ban all private cryptocurrency. The Indian government has listed the cryptocurrency and regulation of official digital currency bill for introduction during the winter session of Parliament beginning November 29, seeking to prohibit all private cryptocurrencies but provide for certain exceptions to promote the underlying technology and its uses. The proposed bill, which will also put in place a framework for the Reserve Bank of India to create an official digital currency, comes amid a raging debate over whether the government should ban private crypto cash or regulate them like shares and bonds. A very vocal lobby led by unregulated exchanges has been campaigning for their inclusion under a regulatory system as opposed to an outright ban the government had earlier proposed. RBI has been backing a ban on cryptocurrency, arguing it can be used for illegal purposes apart from limiting the central bank's ability to manage inflation, foreign exchange and the overall economy. It, however, sees no problems with the use of technology for managing logistic chains or land records, but is opposed to its use as a financial instrument. While there have been observations that a ban will be tough to enforce or that it will only drive the entire growing trade underground, those supporting a prohibition have argued that even gambling or drug trafficking is illegal and those found violating the law face strict action. The divergent views had prompted Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to recently hold consultations and call for global cooperation on the issue. While China recently banned all cryptocurrencies, El Salvador is the sole country to permit them for official use. India to release 5 million barrels of crude from reserves in a bid to cool prices. India will release 5 million barrels of crude oil from its strategic petroleum reserves in a concerted effort to bring down global crude oil prices. This is roughly equivalent to a day's consumption in the country. Sector watchers say while the quantity is not big, it is a symbolic gesture that has wider implications for the global energy markets. This release will happen in parallel and in consultation with other major global energy consumers including the US, People's Republic of China, Japan and Republic of Korea. The development is in line with the US call to bring down global crude oil prices, which crossed $85 a barrel last month. The White House said the US would release 50 million barrels of crude oil from the American strategic petroleum reserves. Brent, the most popular benchmark for trade and international trade in crude oil, touched at $86.40 a barrel on October 26th. Prices have now cooled to below $80 a barrel and traded at $78.86 a barrel on November 22nd. India strongly believes that the pricing of liquid hydrocarbons should be reasonable, responsible and be determined by market forces. India and US commit to linking economies across sectors. The United States and India committed to integrating their economies across sectors to harness the untapped potential of the bilateral relationship at the Trade Policy Forum convened after a gap of 4 years. Co-chaired by Commerce and Industry, Textiles, Consumer Affairs and Food and Public Distribution Minister Piyush Goyal and US Trade Representative Ambassador Catherine Tai, the forum resolved to take economic ties between the two countries to the next level and exchanged views on potential targeted tariff reductions. The two sides decided to activate working groups of the Trade Policy Forum on agriculture, non-agriculture goods, services, investment and intellectual property to meet frequently and address issues of mutual concern in a mutually beneficial manner. The idea is to deliver tangible benefits to farmers and businesses of both countries by resolving outstanding market access issues. Specifically, the forum has decided to forge an agreement to facilitate US market access for mangoes, grapes and pomegranates, pomegranate arils from India, and reciprocate with similar access in the Indian market to cherries, pork or pork products, and alpha hay for animal feed from the United States. Discussions will also be held on enhancing market access for products such as distillers, dried grains with solubles from the US, and resolving market access concerns for water buffalo meat and wild-caught shrimp from India. The Indian side has sought restoration of the GSP benefits by the US and said this would help industries from both sides in integrating their supply chain efficiently. The United States noted for suitable consideration. The Reserve Bank of India's Retail Direct Bond Scheme is a mega hit among NRIs. Under this scheme, an individual investor can open a gilt securities account directly in the primary market as well as buy or sell in the secondary market. The Reserve Bank of India's newly floated retail bond scheme is getting a lot of attention from non-resident Indians. Under this scheme, an individual investor can open a gilt securities account, a retail direct gilt, that is RDG account directly in the primary market and buy or sell in the secondary market. Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the program last week. Non-resident retail investors eligible to invest in government securities under Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999 are also allowed to open an account with the RBI and invest in government securities via the RDG scheme. The primary reason could be higher returns. The yield of the Indian government bond at 6.5% to 7% is much higher than the developed market sovereign debt, which falls under a similar risk profile. This new scheme will therefore be a desirable secured debt option for NRIs. The retail direct bond scheme has garnered nearly 32,000 registrations from retail investors to buy government bonds in just 6 days, reflecting investor eagerness for the asset class that was hitherto an institutional monopoly. While the investment may be safe, portfolio advisors are cautioning that investors should be aware of potential mark-to-market losses because of the interest rate risk in an upward cycle that could begin as early as the first quarter of next year. Bond prices and interest rates move in opposite directions. In a rising interest rate scenario, investors are likely to incur mark-to-market losses if they sell it before the scheduled maturity. The interest rate cycle is set to change amid rising consumer prices. Under the current circumstances, if sovereign securities are held until maturities, it aids the steady flow of interest income. Sovereign papers offer the highest safety of investment, allaying rate uncertainties. Retail participation in bonds globally has not yet matched the interest for equities. Of late, it is showing some signs of improvement. Countries like Japan have funded their development using domestic retail bond markets. A new study says that the Indian vaccine Covaxin is 50% effective against the symptomatic COVID-19. 2 doses of Covaxin are 50% effective against the symptomatic disease, according to the first real-world assessment of India's indigenous COVID-19 vaccine published in the Lancet Infectious Diseases Journal. Results of an interim study recently published in the Lancet showed that 2 doses of Covaxin, also known as BBV152, had 77.8% efficacy against symptomatic disease and present no serious safety concerns. The latest study assessed 2,714 hospital workers at the India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi from April 15 to May 15, who were symptomatic and underwent RT-PCR test for COVID-19 detection. Researchers noted that the Delta variant was the dominant strain in India during the study period, accounting for approximately 80% of all confirmed COVID-19 cases. Covaxin, developed by Hyderabad-based Bharat Biotech in collaboration with the National Institute of Virology, Indian Council of Medical Research, Pune, is an inactivated whole virus vaccine administered in a 2-dose regimen 28 days apart. In January this year, Covaxin was approved for emergency use in India for people aged 18 and above. Indian expats in UAE are excited about the launch of a new air service to Delhi. Air Arabia Abu Dhabi, the UAE's newest budget carrier and the first out of capital Abu Dhabi, has announced a new service to New Delhi starting November 24th. Travelers from the UAE will now be able to fly direct to the Indian capital 4 times a week with scheduled flights to depart Abu Dhabi every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday and Saturday at 10:35 am, arriving in Delhi at 3:20 pm Indian Standard Time. The return flights will depart New Delhi on the same days at 4 pm IST and arrive back in the UAE capital at 6:40 pm UAE time. Long-time Indian expats living in the UAE said that this announcement has come at the right time with the UAE in the midst of a festive season. Another Indian resident said that he hoped the new service will help keep airfares low during the upcoming holiday season. Customers can book their direct flights between Abu Dhabi and New Delhi by visiting Air Arabia's website by calling the call center or through travel agencies. With services to Cochin, Calicut and Trivandrum, this will be the 16th route for Air Arabia Abu Dhabi since the launch of the carrier service from the Abu Dhabi International Airport last July. Raveena Tandon Aranyak trailer is out. The movie is a thrilling story that also sheds light on prejudices faced by female officers. Bollywood yesteryear superstar ruled the 1990s with her effortless performances and swept the audiences off their feet with her dance moves. Raveena Tandon is all set to make her digital debut with Netflix's upcoming crime thriller Aranyak, where she will be seen playing a police officer. The series spotlights the hardships and prejudices female officers face as they try to strike a balance between their work and personal lives. Set in the dense forest, Raveena Tandon plays a local cop who all her life waits for a big case, and one fine day news of a teenage tourist murder shakes her up and joins forces with a city-bred replacement, Angad, played by Parambrata Chatterjee, to solve the case. As the two struggle to find the serial killing entity, forgotten folklore is revived. The trailer also features Ashutosh Rana, Meghna Mali and Zakir Hussain. The 47-year-old actress will be seen playing a fierce officer named Kasturi Dogra and says her character in itself is so strong she would reach out to you anyhow. Aranyak will air from December 10th on Netflix.
देख नहीं पा रहे, समझ नहीं पा रहे.
That's all for this bulletin.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. And right now, it's time to say goodbye. But before we do that, we'll take a look at some of the functions and events taking place. And don't forget that at 10 a.m., we have the travel updates with Tanvi Goyal of Oz India Travels.
there a Gold Coast and Tweed border bubble that would be exempt from the testing requirements?
We are currently looking at that border bubble, but I think, as you can see at the moment, my understanding is that there's been some cases detected in Byron Bay, and they've actually shut down the backpackers. So these are the sort of issues that we need to look at very closely. But yes, we are looking at a border bubble. Okay.
And Cairns Hospital only has 16 ICU beds, so how confident can you be that we're going to be able to handle a surge once the border's open?
Yeah, well, what we need is everyone to get vaccinated. The more people that are vaccinated, the less pressure is going to be put on our hospitals. And I know that the Cairns Hospital and Health Service does a great job up here. Our hospitals are getting prepared. COVID will be coming in. And let me just say, you don't want to get COVID. So please, please, please sit down, talk to your GP, talk to your friends that have had the vaccine, and please go and get vaccinated. The vaccine centre, where we're standing at today, at the Cairns Convention Centre, is open. They're taking walk-ins. Please come in, talk to someone, and get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Minister.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, the message directly from the Premier that get vaccinated and that COVID is coming. So the message there is, with all these vaccinations, people are thinking about, okay, this will be the end of things. It's not. Once the borders and everything open, then that's when, COVID will actually really hit. But if you are vaccinated, you won't have things to worry about. That's what the message is, that it is knocking on our doors, it will be here. So, with the borders opening, that will be what's going to happen. But right now it's time to say goodbye until the next segment, which is the travel updates with Tanvi Goyal, coming up right up next at 10 a.m. We'll see you then. Thank you so much for joining in.